In this video I will showcase how I created this 3D product animation. If you are a beginner, don't worry, you can still follow along and try it yourself, as the animation is not that difficult. If you do not have a 3D model of this cooler, check out the playlist with other tutorials on how to model and texture this thing. Or you can download the model for free from my Payhip website. Special thanks to my supporters, I really appreciate it, guys. If you want to support my channel as well, you can get the scenes featured in this video, all the links are in the description. We are starting with this scene. Right now I'm adding the camera and centering it so that the CPU cooler is positioned in the middle of the frame. Next I add a cylinder and scale it up to create a nice background. One part of the screen shows the render to you, and here I'm adding a few light sources, so my main goal right now is to set up the lighting for the final look of the scene. Later on I will adjust the light strengths and fine-tune it as I animate. I will add one more window with shader editor where I will set the background color and set its roughness to 1. Now I add a plane at the center of the CPU cooler. This plane will act as a light source, so I create a new material to it, name it emission, and parent it to the CPU empty. By doing this, whenever I move the 3D model, the plane will follow its path as well. In the emission tab I set strengths to 4, then in the object properties I go to the visibility tab and uncheck everything except for glossy and transmission. This way the plane still emits light, but it is not visible to the camera. At this point I'm just adjusting the plane scale to find what works best for the scene. So in render settings I'm now choosing between different color management options, and you can do the same thing, choose different contrasts and see what works the best for you. I'm going for filmic view and high contrast here. Another thing we can do is switch to the World tab in the shader editor and add a principal volume to enhance the lighting. After that I will render the image and move on to the compositing tab. Here I add a glare node and set it to fog glow. You can experiment with the values to see what looks the best. Right now I will mute and unmute the node so you can see the difference. And the next few nodes I am adding are blur and brightness/contrast. Now the animation process begins. I will open the timeline, limit the playback to 120 frames and move the slider to the frame 0. I will set the light strength to 0 and add a keyframe. Then moving to frame 72 I will increase the light power to 900. And as you can see, we now have a nice light fade effect. And I will do just the same for other light sources. The lights are ready, now I will animate the movement of the CPU cooler. First, press N on your keyboard, then hover over the location and rotation tabs and press I to insert keyframes. Next, I will move to a different frame, press R and then Z to rotate the cooler along the Z axis. I will right click and choose Insert Single Keyframe, and finally at frame 0 I will rotate the object slightly as well. In the graph editor I will double click on the axis I want and just play with it until I see something I like. If you see linear graph on your file, press T and choose Bezier to fix that. I also move the cooler along the Y-axis to make the scene look a bit more dynamic. To animate the blades, at frame 0 insert a keyframe for the Y location. Then at frame 140 set the Y location to 2300 and add another keyframe. After that you can simply go to the output settings and render frames as PNG files. This is the second scene we will be working on. I've already set up the lighting and the camera, and the cooler is rotated upside down since we will be focusing on the heat tubes in this scene. Next to the camera I have a plane with roughness set to 1, along with 2 light sources that will highlight the heat tubes during the animation. I also have a few planes with an emission value set to 0.85. If you go to the Object Properties tab and open the Visibility section, you can uncheck the camera option to hide the plane in the render view. The emission will still be visible. Now let's open the timeline, and just like in the previous scene, I will hover over the location and rotation properties and press I to add keyframes. Then at frame 100 I'll move and rotate the object as shown on screen and add keyframes. At frame 160 I'll move the object to the left and rotate it 180 degrees, and the last keyframe should move the object out of the camera view. Right now I'm adjusting the keyframes to my liking, but feel free to do the same in your project. Next I open the graph editor to modify the keyframes and adjust their speed. I will double click on the axis I need, then scale it up or down until I get a result I like. I'm also adding a noise modifier and tweaking the values so the animation looks smoother. Right now I'm copying and pasting the modifier to other keyframes and adjusting them as well. And now we need to animate our heat pipes. The texture is the same as in the previous tutorial, but I have added the heat effect. I will not go in depth with the notes here, but you can pause the video and copy them to your project. What I've done is I animated the Y rotation from a negative value to a positive one. This way you can see the emission gradually take over our main material, which is exactly what we want. Next, I added an ice material and included a node group for texture transition. There are many ice material tutorials on YouTube, so you can either watch those or pause the video to copy my node group. In the middle is our default texture, at the bottom you will see the procedural ice material. And you can check how it looks in the rendered view. At the top we have our texture transition node, and here we animate the factor to change between the textures. In the timeline you will see I have added keyframes for the texture transition. I have also added a camera movement that will end this scene. Right now I'm just playing around with the speed and intensity. And as always, I have added a principled volume to improve the lighting. Right now we are going to work on both of these scenes. Here I simply place our CPU cooler and camera in front of each other and add a light source. I am aiming for rim lighting to highlight the boundaries of our object, and I also move the camera around to find the best angle. So next we should add a plane and assign an emission material to it. And the strength should be set to 1. I leave the lighting where it is and experiment with it again. The thing with lighting is that you probably won't get it perfect on your first try, so you always need to try different things and see how they affect the scene. Alright, so I've added an additional light source for the CPU cooler, and this ensures that the image is not completely dark at the start of the scene. I have also added a depth of field effect and focused the camera on the center of the CPU cooler, so the background details will be slightly blurred. And now I'm animating both the camera and the CPU blades just like I did in the previous scene. Next I've placed the emission plane in the middle of the CPU cooler, so right between the radiator plates, and I think it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to animate the emission power as well, so the first keyframe set the emission power, then for the next few frames set it to 0 and hold it there. After that you can simply copy and paste the keyframes until you want the plane to start emitting light again. Once we have blocked everything out, the only thing left is to make it look smoother, so I will tweak some settings and values. Again, I'm adding a noise texture to the CPU cooler so it does not look static. In addition, I want the blades to move in slow motion, so I will adjust the keyframes in the graph editor to slow them down. And for the last scene I moved the camera a bit and added extra lighting that's parented to the camera, and this way the light source will move with the camera and continuously highlight the boundaries of the object. Then I simply animate the camera movement on the Z-axis and rotate the CPU cooler slightly as well. And here's the final result. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Again, you can download the scenes in the description. We will continue with the modeling tutorials in the future videos, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss anything. Feel free to share your feedback and experience with the scene, and I see you next time.